All right, Hello Writing 350. I want to take you through this brief slideshow about your formal reports for your team. So bear with me if it's a little bit loud. I'm sitting out on a patio in Tampa, Florida, as I'm recording this next to a loud street and some construction. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me, and nothing too crazy will happen. So here we go. All right, so I kind of just want to make this video to break down the team report and make sure that to kind of answer any of the commonly asked questions and things like that. So just the slideshow itself will probably be helpful to you as you're going through this. And this is just kind of a breakdown of chapter 15. So this is sort of the assignment and chapter hybrid. I'm not going to take you through every little beat. It's not the most engaging topic in the entire world, but it's an important one. So stay tuned with me if you kind of just want the hot tips, right, of creating these reports. So what you're going to do, essentially, when we're talking about the report, and of course, we haven't been meeting in class, so haven't had a chance to formally talk about this, but all throughout the semester, as we're thinking about making a proposal, we have a client, the client has a problem, now we want to research and understand, now we need to give them some information, right? So ultimately, as a team, you're going to come up with recommendations for your client, all right? So what are they going to do? You also will have conclusions, right? So the difference between these are your conclusions are we did this study or we looked into this, we researched this, and this is what we have realized, right? Maybe your realization is that the scope of the problem is way bigger than you thought, or is smaller, or it impacts some other population than expected, right? You may have concluded something completely different than you thought in the beginning, right? This is really a marketing issue, or this is really a sales issue when we thought it was an accounting problem or whatever. So you're going to present that conclusion to them, and then what do you want them to do? So your group may have one recommendation, you may have 3, you may have 5. You may say that your recommendation is to keep doing things the same way or to wait a period of time. You don't have to have like a huge bulleted out action plan for them to do, right? It has to be something reasonable. So this is ultimately where you're going to present in your final presentation. And I'll talk about that more in that specific video, but just keep in mind that that's really the heart of what we're looking at, right? In this report this is what you're kind of ending up. So you're going to talk about the research that you conducted and then give these conclusions and recommendations. So we're looking for business writing style, right? Fairly formal and all those kind of things. And not just a data dump, right? Here's a bunch of information, here's a bunch of stats, things of that nature. So if you do have sources and visuals, you do need to cite those, and I am hoping that you have both. If you don't have either or you're missing one, you're probably off track, right? Because we didn't do primary research, meaning we probably don't have a ton of interviews or we don't have surveys, then all of the other research that we did was secondary, meaning, online sources or magazine articles and things like that. So we need to make sure that you're citing those and introducing them as you're using them throughout your text. So just like in your proposal, your report has kind of these itty bitty little sections that are fussy. And I'll kind of take you through these really quickly. So your title page, fairly self-explanatory. I put in this slideshow samples from the textbook. I also posted a bunch of student samples for you to use as well. Your first thing you'll start out with, you can choose to write a letter or a memo, and essentially it releases the report, and you can look at the samples of how to complete that. Table of contents, a list of illustrations. If you have illustrations, and this isn't just drawings, right? So any graphical information that you have, you'll want to include that as kind of like a little separate piece in the second part of your table of contents. You'll have an abstract summary, essentially giving the audience an overview of what your whole report will cover. So if this was to get stuck in a drawer for 10 years and somebody pulled it out, they could read this without having to read the whole report. Oh, okay, if they wanted, to do this. So your introduction has several little sections. So be really mindful of this as you're trying to divvy up the different pieces, that not all of these are created equally. Some of these are going to take almost no time. Some of them are going to be longer. So you really want to make sure you have a good understanding of the sections before you say, hey, you write this, because you're going to be inequitable in the way that you divide things up. So starting with this purpose section, you're just essentially taking from the problem section that you've already written, and what your purpose is. Why are you doing this? What is your intent? Just another kind of hot tip. You can use any of the content from your proposal that is relevant, right? You can rework any of that information. Obviously, this isn't just a copy and paste buffet, but if it's irrelevant, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? You can use some of that stuff. The scope is going to be how broad an area the report surveys. So, if you're writing about Volkswagen, is it international? Is it just affecting their operations in North America? Is it, where is it sort of talking about? What assumptions do we have to be under to make this recommendation work, right? So we might have to assume that there's money, that there's time, that there's willingness, that people can learn these new things, that this jives with the values, whatever, is kind of happening. We have to assume that this is a problem, even though we couldn't talk to a certain person. What are we working under there? You want to include your methods, right? So what'd you do? So in your proposal, this was just kind of a list of the sources. Instead, you're going to discuss it in kind of a paragraph format, right? And in this case, you'll notice that your methods are going to be a little different than the sample version. The sample is going to have a lot more survey and interview. When we do this course in the full semester, it's a little bit more research in that way. So a lot of you will have secondary research, meaning, we looked up several articles, we looked at company information. If you did talk to someone or do a focus group or survey, that's great. Chances are you probably didn't do that. What limitations did you have in creating this report and recommendation? So it may have been time, it may have been money, it may have been that you didn't have access to certain information, or something like that. So you got to be real about the limitations that you face without, making it excuses, right? But just that, this was something we couldn't overcome. And then including any definitions that your audience needs to know. So remember that your audience in this case is not me, your professor, it's the client specifically. So is there something that they don't know, right? And you may or may not have definitions in that case. That kind of takes you through to your criteria section. A lot of teams get confused about this. The book example has a bunch of percentages and a breakdown. This can be very short, okay? So don't get hung up on that. You can look more to the student examples. But essentially, we're kind of looking at like the values, right? The standards that we have to consider for this to be successful, right? So if, say you're working for a specific company and it's very important that all of their anything that they put out there is very honest, right? Or it needs to be accessible to elderly people, or it needs to, be made with the finest material, whatever, right? What values, what criteria have to be met for this to be successful? And that's going to be different for everybody. So just think about what some of those might be. And then that kind of leads you to this background and history section, a brief history of the problem. But again, you can use this from your proposal as long as it was strong enough. Some of yours, this term, were a little short, and you want to make sure that it's around that 2-paragraph mark. So get a little more detailed there. And then the body and the research section. This is the section of your report that's a lot less prescribed. So you're going to sort of present the research that you found and the information. So you can break this up in any way that's relevant, right? So maybe there was a report that was released that you're going to analyze. Maybe there has been social media backlash. Maybe there has been news articles, right? User experience, whatever, right? All of the things that you're sort of looking at and discussing. This is where you'll probably put those visuals, use separate headers. This will be one of your longer sections. So don't just tell somebody to do this section because this is a big bulk of it. And again, your book example leans more heavily on the criteria. Yours is not going to do that. You're just going to look at the research. And this is where you're saying, this is what we understand about this problem. And this is how we came to the conclusion that we came to, right? So that's what will come next. The conclusion is the summary, right? Or kind of that, a little bit of like synthesis, right? Here's all the stuff we found, and it means this. We've concluded X because of this, right? And then the recommendation is, all right, here's what you're going to do. So you don't have to explain these in great detail, only if you think they're going to meet with disapproval. Like if your client is Coke and you're like, you know what, you guys just shut down. That's our recommendation. they're going to say, what? And you're going to need to explain that to them. So you can, again, look at the examples, but this can be kind of a one page with a numbered list. The purpose of this course is not for you guys to come up with the best business strategy in the world, okay? If your conclusion or your recommendation is, not 100% correct, that's not really what we're grading on. Now, of course, it has to still exist in the realm of reality. So you can't be like, oh, your solution to your problem would just be, to buy everyone in your company a Lamborghini and they'll be fine. Obviously, we can't do that. But I don't have the expectation that everyone in this class has like an MBA or is even interested in that. So just do the best that you can, right? With the reasonable set of skills that you all have, and that's fine. So don't get so hung up on the business side as it is about, we researched this, we wrote about this, we're communicating it in a clear way, right? And your ideas can be as creative as you like, right, within the realm of possibility. And then you'll have an appendix section if you need one, where if you have any survey questions or data sets or anything that couldn't fit within the content, if you have a giant image, right, that you don't want to stick in the middle, you could put it through there as well. And then kind of goes on from here, and you can read this when you look at the slides. But your book breaks down a method of trying to break up this project, and I actually think it's a good idea. So you might want to look at this recommendation of how to do it, because it's a little bit daunting at first. So that might be helpful to you. That's up to you. So again, there's many samples available to you. Theirs will look a little different than yours in that they're working with all local clients and you're not. So you're treading a little bit of different ground than the ones that are out there. In some ways your job is harder, in some it's easier. You're not relying on anyone else to get data, right? You can get all of that right from the old Google. So hopefully that helps you in terms of time. And this is not due until that final Sunday before finals week. So not due the day that we meet. So just keep that in mind as well. So if you have any questions, of course, let me know. And I look forward to reading these.